Hello, everyone, and welcome to this IFST webinar, keeping pace with the evolving regulatory landscape in the food and beverage industry, organised by us, TraceGains. My name is Dan McGlynn. I'm an account executive at TraceGains, and I was the first hire outside of North America, which is almost 3 years ago now. And I've been focused on growing the EU and UK market. I've been working for software companies aligned to the food industry for the last decade, and I've seen firsthand the change in demand and requirements for good quality data in an industry that needs to adapt to constant change. The regulatory landscape is forever evolving, and keeping track of changes and, importantly, understanding how these changes impact your business is more critical than it ever has been before. Today's webinar takes a look at mastering European regulatory compliance, and I'm pleased to say we're in partnership with the IFST and SGS DigiComply for this webinar. Today we're going to cover the latest regulatory changes affecting the food industry across Europe and how these can impact your business, and also some really good insights on how to navigate and stay ahead of these changes efficiently. Just a bit of housekeeping for everybody. This webinar is being recorded and will be uploaded to the IFST's Webinar Hub. Please feel free to make comments and ask questions throughout the webinar using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. There's a nice feature as well, is if you see a question, you can upvote that by clicking the like button next to their question. That just saves you asking the same question. And what I'll be doing is I'll kind of be asking the questions at the end by order of popularity of those questions in the Q&A. So please get them flooding in. And then there will be a Q&A session after the presentation where we will respond to as many of these questions as possible, okay? So, do you know what? I am thrilled to introduce our speakers today. I work with Carrie. Carrie Barnes is TraceGains Regulatory Standards Manager. She is a BS in biological sciences and has managed technical laboratories in the field of molecular genetics and food microbiology. She's a shameless regulatory nerd who begs for more conversations about the value of regulatory intelligence and navigating complex and ever-evolving regulatory landscapes. So welcome, Carrie. And I'm really pleased to have Ty Blaisley on this webinar as well. Ty is the Director of Business Development for SGS DigiComply. And Ty works with DigiComply's strategic clients and partners to adopt data solutions that address compliance, regulatory, and food safety challenges. So there is more information on our speaker's biography. Please have a look at the IFST website. So kind of with that over with, those introductions, Carrie and Ty, I'd love to hand over to you for going through your presentations.
All right. Well, hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this webinar about keeping pace with the ever-evolving regulatory landscape. What you can expect to learn today, understanding the current regulatory challenges and trends from a global and European perspective, with a specific focus on sustainability and food safety. Learning how to develop and implement a strategic regulatory change management program within your organization, gaining insights into effective methods for monitoring and responding to new regulations and legislative updates in the food and beverage sector. And finally, discover the role of technology and innovation in ensuring compliance and enhancing product traceability. Right, so let's just take a quick moment to jump into regulatory change management and really define what that means. So regulatory change management really is the process of identifying, interpreting, and applying procedural change to day-to-day business practices in response to evolving legislation. Regulatory change management informs business risks. It identifies opportunities and supports the management of compliance frameworks to ensure the delivery of safe and legal products to consumers. And it also has a very large impact, a positive impact on speed to market.
And so why is effective regulatory change management so important? This is really going to be the focal point. The focal point for today is kind of understanding the environment in which we operate and what are some of the keys to successfully operating as a food technologist, as a food company in this type of environment. So what we see from a regulatory perspective are a few different things. First of all, it's just the overall complexity within the environment today globally. There's a high volume of data coming out of many different sources, government agencies, NGOs, scientific publications, just coming from many different sides. And it's rapidly evolving. It's constantly changing. The other challenges you deal with is that information's not always available in certain markets in, let's say, more of an online format. Sometimes you actually even need to physically go to an office to obtain a regulation, a piece of legislation. And so, you know, there's different formats, different sources of information that exist globally. And so it is a fragmented also in that sense. I'd say the other consideration when considering maybe moving a bit more from the external side to internally is then how does this information flow throughout your organization? And, you know, as you're coming across changes, how do those then changes work their way through to the multi-stakeholder environment that our food companies are, right? That you have to deal with people in many different departments, different layers of the organization, and how you effectively then communicate that information and bring others on board in that stakeholder decision-making process is very important.
So just a quick introduction to TraceGains. We operate in a lot of different areas, but we have this one flagship product that is called supplier management. And what it does is through the standardization of online forms, so at the supplier level, there's supplier questionnaires, there's sustainability questionnaires. At the item level, there's an item questionnaire, allergen questionnaire, nutrition's country of origin, suitability, so for gluten, organic, kosher, halal, GMO. We've standardized these online forms, which allows a supplier to fill out a form one time and then distribute it to all of their customers instead of receiving all of these disparate proprietary forms from all of their customers and filling them out individually. They can fill out one standardized online form and then submit that to all of their customers. And through that, we're able to take that information, instead of just having information living in a PDF, we can make the data that is collected at the supplier and item level digital and actionable, so that we can then feed that data like a thread through all of these different areas. There's network, what we call network product development, which you call new product development. And that data can feed through to help you automate managing your specifications, managing your formulas, managing co-manufacturing of your finished goods, and also labeling. And then in the realm of compliance, we're able to help that digital thread, that data feeding through helps you ensure that your suppliers are compliant, that the lots that they're sending you are compliant, that the COAs meet the specifications that were agreed upon. It gives you a central location to manage all of your corrective actions and preventative actions, whether that's associated with your suppliers or items, or in the larger picture of your quality management system. And also through auditing, You can audit internally, externally. And then the really exciting area that is just growing exponentially is intelligence. So when we already have your supplier and item information, we can do really amazing information with it, right? We can create actionable data that you are collecting from your suppliers about them and about their items. And so that can be in terms of foods. And this is where our partnership with SGS DigiComply comes in. And you'll see throughout this webinar, I am a shameless SGS DigiComply fangirl. The value that they add to this whole digital thread is immense. So for food safety, we have Horizon Scanning Global, where we have your items, we have your suppliers. You can just flip a switch and now you can see global food safety incidents associated with your items, with your suppliers. You can be notified, so you're constantly monitoring and receiving notifications when there's issues occurring. Then there is also, oops, Ty, if you go, I'm so sorry, if you go back just for 1 second. And so then we also have the regulatory global aspect of that. Again, we have your items and suppliers. So now we can make it so that you can go in and search up regulations, existing, upcoming. You can use all kinds of filters to focus specifically on areas like sustainability or labeling or additives. Also part of regulatory global are regulatory food guides, which are market entry guides that have there's 166 different guides where you can go in and look at this across all of the markets in which you operate or are interested in entering, so that you can understand what the regulatory framework looks like for that particular market. We also have restricted substances that can be tied directly into your formulas and recipes and understand what maximum limits are for a whole variety of different types of contaminants, food additives, pesticides, heavy metals, mycotoxins. And then we can also layer ESG data onto that and information about claims, substantiation. So the takeaway here really is that technology really, the type of technology that Ty and I are involved in really allows for the capture of vast amounts of data throughout the supply chain, and it can automate compliance, new product development, and intelligence.
Yeah, so we've been in partnership with TraceGains now. This is our third year together, and we're providing a data into the system as Carrie described. Just very briefly on kind of understanding what we do, because it's definitely going to be an integral part, I think, of the conversation throughout today. Is that DigiComply, in short, is we're processing large amounts of information coming from government agencies, as I mentioned earlier, news and media, science, NGOs, incident-related data, as Carrie mentioned as well. And so that's kind of what's coming in at the top end of that funnel there. Then we're using machine learning to understand the context of these publications, and we're organizing them in info into topic, domain, market, and then you're then able to actively monitor for new developments, for new information, or you can then search within the corpus of over 5 million documents that we have in the system. So there's 3,000 sources that we're scanning globally. And then as a document is then brought into the system, it's essentially tagged and classified. So that's kind of showing you then what you're doing here. And we're going to come back to this later. You can then take a very broad scan of the market developments and then come and be very specific on monitoring or looking for developments as they apply specifically to an individual ingredient, particularly focused on the policy domain or the sustainability domain. So we'll speak to this more, but I think it's going to be something that you'll kind of see throughout today. So with regard to, let's shift to a bit, what are some of the challenges and trends we see in the market? And we picked out a few here today. But what we really want to do is understand as well, why it matters to food technologists. How are these developments, these changes, particularly relevant and need to be considered as well, I think, for you in your day-to-day work.
So one thing that we learn, that we keep learning over and over again, relearning, is the concept of regulatory by design. Regulations really need to be considered at the earliest stages of product development. 75% of new products fail within the first 4 years. And the top issues here really are around companies failing slowly at product development and products taking too much time to actually reach the market. And then there's always the inefficiencies of reformulating. A couple of things that come to mind when we're talking to food technologists really is there's a large umbrella of area of regulations in which you need to be aware, right? There's food safety, that's everybody's business, right? Always ensuring safe food and preventing foodborne illness. So understanding sanitation practices, hazard analysis and critical control points and good manufacturing practices, understanding labeling to ensure accurate information is displayed on food packaging and in the ingredient lists and in the nutritional information, allergens. Also understanding maximum limits for not just food additives, but for pesticides and heavy metals and mycotoxins. In terms of food additives, you really need to understand what is approved for use, what has limits, what has actually been banned, and then standards of identity, really understanding how specific foods are defined and what ingredients they must contain to ensure consumers get what they expect.
Indeed. So the earlier that you weave in or begin to incorporate regulatory changes, regulatory considerations into product design, it just seems like the better position you'll be in. Another reality, certainly it applies globally as well, but you guys certainly see it in Europe, is of this diverging regulatory environment. If you take the example of the front of pack labeling in Europe, it's an interesting one to watch as an example, because here you see a variety of different front of pack labels or icons being used. You have the schemes on the Nutri-Score here. You have the keyhole scheme. You've got different ones being tested, being applied. We recently read about this adoption of it in Portugal, Nutri-Score. It's also used in Germany, Belgium, Netherlands. But there's restrictions on it in other countries. So you see this split as well, a little bit in Europe, probably more of the food culturally rich countries. I mean, Italy is very much pushing back on this. And therefore it makes it complicated within the EU to really have progress in this domain. Another one maybe closer to home as well is just how the role that the UK is playing with regard to food allergies. Just a lot happening here, and certainly different than I think in other markets as well, where you have requirements on pre-packed for direct sale. You need to provide allergy information more and more in the also on non-pre-packed food. And so we just see as well this evolution happening more and more with regard to allergen related information and how it's displayed on various food products in the UK market. Another interesting one is with regard to lab grown food and meat, particularly. Also, Italy comes to mind here because their parliament has recently banned the use of lab grown meat. And this may violate single market rules in the EU. So in general, we see this divergence where you have also other countries like the Netherlands who are very much kind of pushing for this, but then you have resistance in in other markets. So even here, certainly with the UK, as you diverge from the EU's regulatory framework in with regard to food is significant. But I guess one of the key points here is that even within the EU, we're seeing more and more this national resurgence, and therefore it then leads to a complicated environment for you as food technologists to develop products for those closest markets, because now you really need to be looking at individually, what's happening in France, what's happening in Italy, what's happening in Spain, and having it be less feasible just to rely on the EU regulations alone.
Yeah, and to that point, that it is just navigating all of the safety regulations, food safety regulations, right? That's always going to be paramount. Regulations are always going to evolve. They're always ensuring compliance is always going to be challenging. And then there's also understanding your market and the markets in which you operate. Your company has to have that collective knowledge. One of the trends that we're seeing on a global scale really is the sustainability is on the rise, right? It's a major focus for food regulators around the world, not just food, but regulators around the world, but very specifically in the food and beverage industry. There's new regulations being implemented to encourage sustainable food production practices, and to reduce environmental impact of the food and beverage industry on the planet. And one of the things that we're really seeing is European nations are really leading this charge with new and evolving regulations that address areas like water and land usage, waste management, carbon footprints, responsible sourcing, excuse me, and eco-friendly packaging solutions. So a couple of examples, and wow, when you really look at this, you can really see, who is leading the charge, right? There's a lot of newly introduced legislation and current but evolving legislation, and a lot of it is coming out of Europe. So on the packaging waste directive, right? This is a key piece of the larger waste framework directive that was originally adopted in 1994, 30 years ago, if my math is correct there. But it's currently under revision to meet modern packaging challenges. And this piece of legislation specifically targets packaging waste, and it emphasizes prevention, reduction, reuse, and recycling over disposal. And this really creates an opportunity to really explore innovative packaging solutions. The next one is the Single-Use Plastics Directive, adopted in 2019, bans certain single-use plastics like cutlery, plates, straws, stirrers, food containers, beverage containers, plastic bags. And again, just another opportunity, right, to explore alternative packaging materials like bioplastics and reusable containers. The EUDR, the deforestation regulation adopted in 2023, this one very specifically targets global commodities of the most egregious global commodities of soy, beef, palm oil, wood, cocoa, coffee, and rubber. And it aims to create a more sustainable future for global forests by disrupting the economic incentives that drive deforestation and promote responsible practices throughout the supply chain. And so as we talk about complexity and evolution, this has been, the core regulation is in place and in effect, but some aspects of it are still under development. The next one is the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, adopted in 2022, creates a more transparent, sustainable business environment by requiring all large companies and most listed companies to disclose information on what they see as the risks and opportunities arising from social and environmental issues and their impact on the activities of their manufacturing on people in the environment. And there's the German Supply Chain Due Diligence Act, Similar, aims to create more responsible, sustainable business environment, both domestically and on a global scale. And then upcoming, expected soon, is the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, which aims to make companies to move companies beyond just simply reporting on sustainability and actually taking concrete action to ensure more sustainable and ethical business practices.
And so I think what this is telling me is that the lens or what you need to be monitoring for as it applies to your products, your ingredients, the packaging that you use, it's just becoming that much harder. It's becoming that broader. I mean, these are very broad. It's a very broad umbrella here of different areas, water reuse down to the packaging, whatever it may be. And so therefore, to stay up on those changes as it applies to your business means that there's just a lot more information to focus on. I'd say the last on kind of what we see is some of the trends within the market, and then once again how it applies to you is this democratization, if you will, of product and regulatory information. And I think here's where you see the advances in technology, for example, in even just things like translation, machine learning. This all means that you have access to information probably before, if you looked from a regulatory standpoint, it was you often had a very dedicated or local expert, who knew specifically that country's language. They knew all the different government agencies that they needed to go to find whatever piece of regulation for that particular area. That is happening more and more. Is it's now able to be, you're able to do that without necessarily needing to rely at such an early stage on a local expert. And I think that just opens up a lot of access to information for you. I think something that TraceGains does a fabulous job on is also this idea of moving data, if you will, out of silos, moving it out of your supply chain. And so you just have access to more information as well. And so you can make decisions earlier, you can make decisions better. I think this is something that we see in the marketplace is happening because there's just a richer overall number of service providers, tools, and technologies to benefit from.
So let's move on to building and implementing a strategic program for regulatory change management. So there's 4 key components here, really. Developing compliance protocols, staying informed, conducting regular internal assessments, and fostering a culture of compliance. So just like any other area of managing the food and beverage manufacturing, developing compliance protocols is incredibly important, right? Establishing clear, well-documented procedures for meeting regulatory requirements, and including really important details for what is required for record keeping, for documentation, your hazard analysis plan, quality control and quality assurance measures, and what will require corrective actions and preventative actions. Staying informed, proactively monitoring regulatory updates through industry publications, government websites, and professional associations, and utilizing resources like regulatory databases and subscription services like TraceGains and SGS DigiComply. And then establishing a system to make sure that that information is communicated to everyone at your organization, so that everybody understands, what you are required to comply with and the implications of that. And then, excuse me. conducting regular assessments, right? Anytime we're always talking about internal auditing or third-party audits. Here, you really want to periodically assess your compliance status against the current regulations in the markets, your domestic market, and also in the markets in which you operate. Just so that you can identify any potential gaps and areas for improvement. And there's always opportunities. And then utilizing internal and external assessments to identify the potential risks and opportunities to ensure continued compliance. The last one here, if you have any exposure to any GFSI frameworks, BRC or SQF or ISO 22000, you'll notice a commonality here in fostering food safety culture, fostering a culture of compliance where you are promoting that culture so that everyone takes ownership in compliance, encouraging open communication and reporting of potential compliance issues, and providing training and resources to empower employees to understand and comply with regulations.
Yeah, so here's one way to think about that or translate it into maybe something more specific. And I just pulled out a simplified version or created a table from a tool we have within DigiComply, which is this what we call this conversion from a signal to an insight. So when you're actively horizon scanning, you're looking out externally for new signals that can potentially impact your business. You have someone who's operating, who's working on the front edges of this horizon scanning. They're the one who's scanning the large volumes of information. They're looking for signals that could then potentially impact the business. And as they come across these, what do? They flag them. They kind of comment on them internally, and then maybe you have some type of kind of risk qualification, like you have an impact assessment. You determine how this could, what potential outcomes this could have on the business, the reporting date, impacted parties. So you begin to kind of structure this signal so you can, what I say, convert it into an insight, meaning it then becomes a bit of actionable of knowledge within your organization. And then based on the kind of scoring that you give it, you can then trigger a variety of different therefore follow-up steps. Maybe there's a certain checklist that needs to go out to your supplier management team. Maybe this actual decision needs to then be ratcheted up and decided on by someone in management because an ingredient risks being significantly impacted. So, it's really about this setting up a process for a continual risk monitoring, but I also like to say opportunity monitoring as well. And that, anyone who's doing horizon scanning type activities globally, there is more and more that expectation that there's a lot happening out there that's also an opportunity for your business, a new technology that can be used, a new packaging, some new form of packaging to be considered, whatever it may need to be. You can be looking out at what's happening to other countries, other domains, other product types to get new insights to bring back into your organization.
So let's just take a quick dive into what does all of this mean and what does it look like? So through SGS DigiComply, so I started out early in my career managing technical laboratories. I wasn't involved in regulatory at all. So later in my career, when I did get into regulatory, it really was overwhelming, right? To understand all of the food safety regulations, all of the entire framework, just even for the market in which I'm operating. So that would be the United States. But then also the markets in which we operate. So understanding what the requirements are in Europe, in any different country, all the markets in which you operate. Your company really is responsible for having that collective knowledge And if you don't have that collective knowledge, you really need to have technology to help you obtain that knowledge. And the food regulatory guides that DigiComply has put together, they create order out of chaos, right? It's not just Google. It is a vetted, verified guide for each market. There's 166 markets. Those markets include blocks like the European Union. There's a common structure to each one of these guides. Each one is organized into topics and subtopics. You can use automated monitoring and notifications to know when things have been updated or changed in any one of those markets. There's additional guides that pertain to pet food and dietary supplements and nutrition and marketing claims, health claims. And the whole concept here is, okay, we have an entire guide that lays out every single different market, and it breaks it down from an introduction to what the regulatory framework looks like for that particular market, who the competent authorities are. And then it goes through and it lists out, here are the active pieces of legislation around general food law, food additives, labeling, pesticides and contaminants, packaging, importing and exporting procedures and trade agreements, sustainability, and product standards. So the great thing about this is you have this complete guide for an entire market, and those are the regulatory food guides, but in SGS, DigiComply's desire to always improve, they've created this new functionality where you can go in and say, okay, I want to look at one of those topics. I am very interested to learn about processing aids in the markets in which I operate. And so you can go in and say, okay, show me Canada, the European Union, and the United States. I very specifically want to look at the processing aids, the pieces of legislation from each one of those countries or nations to better understand the similarities or differences. You can see if they're regulated, you can see if they're unregulated. And it just gives you that ability to look at all of the markets in which you operate to better understand each detailed piece, each detailed subtopic in each one of the markets in which you operate. And then the next topic is restricted substances, important to food technologists, right? To understand, there's a large umbrella of areas that are regulated in terms of things that have maximum limits. So that could be food additives, it can be contaminants, it can be allergens, nutrition, mycotoxins, pesticides, and veterinary drugs. In SGS DigiComply, you can go right in and say, okay, these are the 3 markets in which I operate. I'm an apple farmer. Here's where I sell my products. And I'm very interested to learn very specifically about a pesticide that I apply to, a neonicotinoid pesticide that I apply to my apple tree. So I can go and enter my markets. And one of the smart things here is that DigiComply will right away say, oh, okay, hey, so you're asking about the European Union, Vietnam, and China. Those are the markets in which you sell your apples. Hey, we want you to know that there's some market segment information that's going to be really important to inform you that we want you to know Vietnam defers to the pesticide limits that have been established by Codex. And then it will return your results to you and show you, in China, this is the limit. Here's the limit for the European Union. Here's Codex's limit. And then even further, there's smart search. And all of this is translated. Regulatory guides are translated into your local language. Restricted substances. If there's something called smart search built into DigiComply, that just helps break down some of these communication barriers and a lot of the complexity of trying to understand simply apples, right? So in this situation, Codex refers to apples as palm fruit. So if you're just using Google, you're not going to be able to Google apple and Codex, right? So the smart search really helps you find exactly what you're looking for. And then throughout your search, you can click in to better understand relevant substances. So acetamiprid may go by several different names. In this case, again, the relevant commodity is apples. Codex refers to apples as palm fruits. So just that careful guidance of getting you to the right place. Then you can go into the matching limits there and click each one of those, and it'll take you directly to that piece of legislation, that section of that legislation that defines what that limit is. And then you can go down to the bottom of the page and look at all of the different regulations that might be associated with that particular search by each country.
Yeah, so here too, the ability to monitor for changes as well. This isn't static information. It's changing, be it the very specific area, as Carrie mentioned. If you're interested in processing aids in these 5 European countries, if they're regulated, you then want to see and be notified if there's a change, if there's new processing aids added, or maybe a more restringent limit is put into force. You can be notified of that. The same here as well within the restricted substances. So, the key aspect, I think, what we see in regulatory change management is understanding what the situation is today, figuring that out, and then monitoring for the developments and having mechanisms in place to catch that and adapt as the environment around you evolves, as it continuously is. So just returning to sustainability, kind of an example here, which I think shows a bit how we're approaching when you look at something that is very broad. And we had an example on the EU and palm oil, for example, but we could take any ingredient. If you're searching for that information, you're searching up palm oil, you're going to get tens of thousands of results, be it in Google, but also within our search engine within DigiComply, because you're going to get information as it applies to contaminant and residue, like pesticide related information, what alerts and recalls there have been around palm oil, what policies are in place, like the one that Carrie described in the EU and deforestation. Are there labeling requirements, standards? A variety of things are going to be out there, and this is why the fact that having the ability to understand the context of that document is so important, because what if you're specifically interested in only in sustainability around palm oil? You want to really monitor for sustainability and implications as they apply to policies and laws that are going into effect around the topic of sustainability. So you have a very detailed, and I don't know if you can see my mouse, but you want to focus very specifically only on that segment where these two kind of planets, if you will, overlap. That's where you're focused on. And so to be able to really kind of put the guardrails around your data at those levels means that you can target very specific things. Just like if you only are interested in understanding what alerts are coming out and recalls are coming out around palm oil, you can be tracking that, and you're not going to have any of your results of clouded by just the much broader number of information or posts that exist. And this, going back to one of the first slides that we started with, allows you to do something like this, which is you can have a very focused, this is just showing an example of one of our feeds where you can be tracking very specifically palm oil sustainability policy at a global level. You're going to be getting the continual, any new posts that come into the system, which you see there. And then we're incorporating more and more AI. We have something called an AI co-pilot, which provides a summary on all of the underlying posts. So even if they're coming from a variety of different sources, you're going to get a very specific summary of those different sources. So it just allows you to scan a broader amount of information, and then have it distilled down and summarized appropriately, using some technology that's becoming more and more available. So that's just kind of showing what this then translates to or can look like actually in some of your day-to-day work. Okay, so to conclude, Carrie, any kind of closing thoughts from your side and on this?
Managing regulations is difficult in your own market, across all of the markets in which you operate. Use technology. It's there, it's at your disposal, and it can create massive efficiencies for all of the areas in which you need to understand and make sure that you're complying with the regulations. Use technology.
Yeah, I'd say that companies also, it's important that you must be ready to take immediate actions, as well as be equipped to monitor standing issues. I think sustainability fits in well there, where there's a lot being discussed, there's a lot working its way through various parliaments or various forms of legislation globally, and we don't they could have significantly more impact in the long term, but it still could be a ways away. We don't know. And so being able to kind of flag those initial signals as they're working their way through and stay up to date on them, and then revisit them continuously. I think that's a big part of change management as well. It's not just responding to an immediate incident or an immediate event. We all do that. We have processes in place to do that, but it's also that long-term plan to continually revisit as an organization, and put proactive measures in place. I mean, that's, I think, a key component of really effective change management and monitoring what's happening in a broader environment. So yeah, so from my side, I think that's one of the things I'd like to close on. And Carrie, if you have any other thoughts, feel free, please.
No, I think that's it.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. I could literally listen to you guys for ages. It's such a huge topic, and I speak, pretty much daily to compliance and regulatory teams, and the amount of effort and time that it takes to knit all of this information together to make sense of it is absolutely huge. So what I'd like to do is just to build on some of Carrie's comments from the start of her presentation, just to build a little bit more on trace gains. So I literally just have a couple of slides, and then we'll end up with sort of the Q&A's bits. There's been a number that's come through, so it'd be great to socialize that. But let me just spend a couple of minutes just talking about trace gains and our ecosystem of data and how we're weaving all of your internal and external supply chain data in with external data sets like what Ty has just spoken about with within SGS DigiComply. The one thing that TraceGains has been building is size and scale. And over the last decade, Carrie talked about our flagship solution as being Supplier Manager. And we recognize and have built a solution where we are removing the duplication, the massive amount of duplication of data gathering that is endemic within the entire industry. So Carrie touched on these standard online forms. What we've been doing is building an ecosystem, a marketplace of every time one of our large global customers onboard all of their suppliers and all of their raw material and packaging items, and importantly, all of the documentation, all the data around there, all of this enters this ecosystem, which we call TraceGains Gather. And we've now created the world's largest networked ingredients marketplace. So we have, it's kind of close to 77,000 supplier locations. We've got well over 500,000 items and ingredients and millions of documents. These are certificates, these are audit reports, and these are thousands and thousands of this standardized data around allergens, around nutritional, around claims. So huge data set. And what's really exciting is we can now weave and interact all of this data in with SGS DigiComply data sets, plus a whole range of other data partners. And we're very excited around the sustainability element, because that, all of that environment has exploded, both with demand for data within the marketplace, but also regulation that Ty has so eloquently gone through and Carrie earlier in the presentation. So we have huge scale within this environment. Now, Carrie provided a really nice sort of overview of our product suite, and I'd like to sort of reiterate a couple of those elements, but also answer one of the questions that's come in on the Q&A. So kind of two for one, as it were. So the supplier management and corrective and preventative management is really the core and the infrastructure to hang all this data on. But we have a whole range of solutions which are all modular. And what's fantastic is this data that we're collecting in collaboration with SGS DigiComply. We are pulling this through into things like your risk assessment. So for horizon scanning, when you're doing vulnerability and threat assessments, pulling in category and raw material information from these alerts that have been happening, from the 3,000 sources of data that Ty was talking about. And then backing up things like your new product development, as Carrie put, our networked product development, because you are utilizing all of this data within the TraceGains network to back up things like claims. And when you are either exporting into existing markets or exploring new markets, new territories for you to sell into, then using horizon scanning, using the network to look for new partners, whether it be co-manufacturing partners or new raw materials, new functional ingredients, new packaging items. Restricted substances is the newest data set that we've brought on board. So all of this rich ecosystem of information data is absolutely transforming how business is undertaken and how businesses run. So this data, pulling this information, I always explain data, the TraceGains as being the hub of all the spokes of data that come in, because the data that is out there is eye-watering. So using platforms like SGS to be able to make sense of that data is absolutely key. So what I will draw everyone's attention to, there's a question that came in around NutriCalc. So for those that aren't aware of NutriCalc, NutriCalc is a nutrition and labeling software platform that's been in the market in the UK for 30 years, so relatively well known locally. But this presentation wasn't on NutriCalc. But just to say that, we have, so NutriCalc is a phenomenal nutrition calculation platform. It has lots of preset, legally compliant label formats for things like front of pack, back of pack. If you want to know more, please reach out, but we've integrated that into the TraceGains suite of solutions. So thank you for that question. Let's go on to Q&A now. Number of questions that have come in. Kind of the first question that I have, Ty, a little bit more for you. You touched on it right at the beginning, but it is critical to really understand the value of the data that you have in. So would you mind going a little bit more detail about what are the sources of the data that you are utilizing and bringing into the SGS platform that we're sort of consuming and interacting on the TraceGains platform?
Yeah, thanks. Also, I saw a question about Turkey, which I answered. So uh, we have so from a global perspective, let's say we're monitoring and built up a database of information coming from 160 countries globally. So if we kind of take it from a more of a market or country perspective, that is what we have in terms of country coverage. And so, that could be the information coming from government agencies as they apply to food and beverage. But then we've also broadened this, also just because as we see, regulations are impacted by also a variety of events or other that happen with beyond just government agencies. It's what is happening maybe from particular NGO communities. It's happening from based on a scientific publication that then leads the way to a regulatory change. So we've definitely broadened. We have those 3,000 sources, and those are coming also from those because we really see this as a risk kind of signal and opportunity signaling beyond just the government agencies alone.
Thank you, Ty.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of want to follow on from that, because we have such massive size and scale, and because the landscape is shifting. AI, artificial intelligence, is such a hot topic at the moment, and I know, Carrie, from our perspective, we are very excited about the possibilities of artificial intelligence. But to both sort of Carrie and Ty, what is the future of AI within this space? Ty, I'll let you open up first.
Yes. So there's so much to that as well, because when we started off, Digi Comply has been on the market for over 5 years now. We were even just the aspect of this, understanding the context of a document. As we bring in a standard from China, well, is this apply to labeling, or does this apply to pesticide contaminants? And recognizing that it's almost like the phase one, if you will, of machine learning and AI. Now, certainly, we've seen the hype curve is now very high, but also with the launch of Chat GPT, and we're now able to utilize some of these technologies that are available to then and apply them to our data set. And this is a critical point here, and then I'll stop talking. It's that one of the big differences between just going out and using a Chat GPT or something like that is that there you're going out into the entire internet. And in our case, we're now able to train models or use these type of technologies on a quality data set, because all of the sources that we have been vetted, they apply to our industry. And so that's highly valuable then when you are doing an AI co-pilot that's summarizing information, it's doing it on quality data, which is paramount for working within some of these these Chat GPT type tools that are now out there.
Yeah, and then just to
almost out of time, Carrie, but yeah, just from your perspective, that'd be wonderful.
Just to build on what Ty said, using a large language model that has been trained in a specific industry, just like he said, if you're using ChatGPT and you ask that question, it's scouring the entire internet. But in this situation, you have a large language model that is just focusing very specifically on one sector, one industry, and that is highly valuable. And at Trace Gains, we're developing our AI strategy now, and it includes a lot of different things, just allowing suppliers to scan in their existing documents that aren't in our standardized format so that we can identify those attributes, pull them out, and route them appropriately.
Fantastic.
Among other things.
Yeah, and absolutely. Carrie, thank you. Ty, thank you. There are a number of questions. We've kind of run out of time. I will pick off just a couple very quickly. There's a question that's coming about confidentiality. Everyone has full control over what they share and what they don't share within the Trace Gains environment. We are not connected to the retailer PLM portals yet, but watch this space, because that is a hot topic at the moment with how data could be shared, certainly along the PLM side for the retailers. For all the other specific questions, please reach out to Carrie and Ty. There's specifics around cans or antioxidants or cultured meat. This is rich information that you could ask, SGS, did you comply, by utilizing and procuring their platform to keep up to speed within this space. Any other questions, we will pass the details for contacting Carrie and Ty will be sent out along with the recording. Thank you so much, Carrie and Ty. Your presentations were absolutely fascinating. We will share the recording of the webinar, including the Q&A session, to everyone that's attended today via email and via the online hub at ifst.org/webinars. And before you log off, please, we have a short survey. It's really important that we get some feedback from you. That will launch shortly after the webinar ends. Again, thank you so much, Carrie, Ty, and everyone else for attending. Enjoy the rest of your day, and goodbye.
Thank you. Thanks, Dan. Bye, Carrie.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.